Next on Newsmax Prime, grassroots groups and rubber stamps, both part of a special delivery on Capitol Hill in opposition to the Pacific trade deal. Then, how realistic is the goal of a third Bush presidency? We'll talk about it with the Chief of Staff to the first President Bush. Plus, Rick Unger on the left, Ford O'Connell on the right, square off with our political panel. Newsmax Prime for Wednesday, June 10th starts now. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, growing opposition to the proposed Pacific trade deal. Grassroots groups on the left and the right converge on Capitol Hill, with one organization delivering rubber stamps. Miranda Kahn has more from our newsroom. Miranda?
JD, the buzzword bipartisan applies to both the supporters and opponents of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and despite polls indicating strong public opposition, TPP supporters can be found at both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue.
I would not be doing this trade deal if I did not think it was good for the middle class.
President Obama telling MSNBC's Chris Matthews why the left should join the right in supporting TPP. The president has joined forces with Speaker John Boehner and Ways and Means Chairman Paul Ryan to push the bill through, but polling indicates that may be an uphill battle. 66% of those responding to an NBC News survey say protecting American industries and jobs is most important, and they want to limit imports from other countries. Only 31% say they favor free trade. The opposition includes senators who are polar opposites, wearing very different partisan labels.
We are seeing that we are unfairly subjecting American manufacturing to currency manipulation, and this is not free trade.
And for the past 20 years, Republicans and Democrats have failed to enforce the promises they made.
The group, Fight for the Future, visited the office of every House Republican, saying they were from the White House. They presented packages, including an actual rubber stamp reading, "I approve President Obama's secret trade deal." JD?
Thanks, Miranda. For more now, we welcome Evan Geer, campaign manager for Fight for the Future, the group responsible for the rubber stamps delivered to those Republican members of Congress. Evan is Skyping in from Boston. And Evan, thanks for some of your time tonight on Newsmax Prime.
Sure, thanks for having me on.
So you and your group, I was trying to define this. It's kind of like satire meets the grassroots. You go to all those Republican offices claiming to be from the White House. What was the reaction you received in those offices?
You know, I think most staffers seemed either excited or a little confused to be getting a package from the White House. And, you know, for us, it was about adding a little bit of mystery to our protest, considering that we're protesting this fast-track legislation that just has such a lack of transparency and so much secrecy around it. So we thought it was apropos to have a little bit of transparency and a little bit of secrecy and mystery around our protest as well.
Mystery, some would call it perhaps mischief. And in that context, Evan, do you worry about any future difficulties on Capitol Hill? For example, someone from the White House or the leadership or the ethics committee saying that you're using false identities when visiting those congressional offices?
We're not too worried about that. Every single package that was delivered included a little note that made it very clear that it was an act of political satire, that it wasn't really from the White House, and that, in fact, you know, these documents are protected by the First Amendment. Our right to kind of poke a little bit of fun politically is protected by the Constitution, and we wanted to remind Congress of that as well while we were making our voices heard about these secret trade deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership and TISA.
Now, when we take a look at this deal and the opposition to it, it seems that there is really a broad coalition of people opposing this on the right and the left. Did you ever envision there might be a subject or a political fight where you would find yourself aligned with elements of the Tea Party?
You know, I think it is an amazing moment, and I think it actually gives some hope that we can get past some of these partisan roadblocks in Washington, D.C., and actually start asking ourselves how we want our government to work.
So is secrecy the major concern, the fact that members of the House and Senate can only go read it, that the contents have not been made public for every citizen to look at the text?
I think that's the unifying concern that allows for a coalition that has both the AFL-CIO and members of the Tea Party and environmental groups and internet groups and tech companies all coming together. That said, there are some very specific concerns that we as an organization have. Fight for the Future was founded to fight for a free and open internet. We were instrumental in stopping the SOPA and PIPA legislation that would have led to global internet censorship a couple years ago. Your listeners and viewers probably remember the big blackouts where Wikipedia and hundreds of thousands of other sites blacked out. Now, we're very concerned that this type of backroom trade deal process, deals like the TPP, like the Trade and Services Agreement that WikiLeaks exposed just last week, are being used by those same lobbyists to push for extremist copyright provisions that could lead to global internet censorship, undermine our basic right to privacy online and off, and really cause fundamental problems for the future of freedom of speech.
Now, as we take a look at this, and it is interesting to see what happened in the Senate with Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and Jeff Sessions of Alabama, poles apart politically and in terms of partisan stripe, coming together on this. Is this the right kind of bipartisanship in your mind?
I do think so. I think you actually see some truth-telling happening from kind of the margins of both parties. And what we see is kind of leadership in both parties seemingly willing to sell out their constituents in a way that some members simply aren't. And I think that's what we're going to see whenever this vote goes down, is there will be members who will side with their constituents. And if you look at the polls, we're talking, at least on the Republican side, 87% of Republican voters oppose giving President Obama this fast track authority. So we're going to see which representatives decide to actually be representatives and represent their constituents, and which ones just go along with the flow of the White House and party leadership on both sides that are pushing for this deal, despite the fact that the public can't see it.
Truth in labeling during the course of this interview. Of course, I'm there on the right, and why we should never assume. I imagine you take a view that is left of center, to say the least. Yet we're talking about this and share some of these concerns. What I'm curious about for the liberal community and the advocacy of this trade deal from President Obama. Did you find this surprising to see the president pushing so hard to get this done?
I think that these types of giant trade deals are bigger than any one politician. And it seems very clear to me that, this has become a priority for President Obama. We as an organization don't terribly take a position on any individual politician. We kind of think that change comes from the bottom up, and it's the responsibility of every citizen of every country to speak out and hold their government to account. And that's what we intend to do, regardless of who's in office.
And we're seeing some scenes of the video that you took with, looks like a phone, given the high tech we have available on the internet now, as you visited these different Republican offices. As I understand it from Capitol Hill, it appears that about 30 House members, as of tonight, will vote no. Do you think that's going to be enough? Will there be enough Democrats in opposition to stop this trade deal in the House of Representatives?
It's certainly going to be a nail biter, and I encourage everyone who is concerned about this, and whatever your position may be, to speak out right now. Now is the moment to be calling your representatives and telling them what you think about this, and expressing your concerns in one way or the other. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. We at Fight for the Future have a simple website, stopfasttrack.com, that will connect you with your representatives with just a couple of clicks, and then you can tell them whatever it is that you might say. But the vote could go either way at this point. It's very much up in the air. I don't think anyone knows for sure. But what we do know for sure is that after this vote, we'll have a good count of which representatives are sticking up for their constituents and which ones are willing to sell them out and pass a secret trade deal that no one can see.
Evan Geer, campaign manager of Fight for the Future. Again, your website on this particular legislation is what?
Stopfasttrack.com.
Stopfasttrack.com. That's what you're out to do, Evan, and we appreciate you opening up your Skype unit and spending some time with us tonight from Boston. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Have a great one.
Yes, sir. We'll continue to monitor this, and we'll have more on Newsmax Prime right after this.